Hi, welcome to the program. I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching The Sit Down. We're hanging out with a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, Amanda Nguyen, CEO and founder of Rise. Really nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
How's everything going?
It's going really well.
So what's 2020 looking like for Rise? Because you've done some incredible work in the past, but I know you guys got a lot going on, so what can we look forward to?
Well, look, the last decade was incredible. We started in 2014, and in these past 5 years, I can't even believe it's been 5 years, we've passed 28 laws for 72 million people. The best part is that I didn't solely pass all these 28. We developed a system, a metric, a blueprint for how anyone, no matter their background, to be a part of the legislative process. So it's actually our organizers, we call them risers, who've passed these laws. So in 2020, and really in this decade, we really want to make that accessible. So one, our goal is still to pass sexual violence civil rights in all 50 states. We have 28 states left to go, and every single year we're working towards that goal. And another one is that we want to pass a worldwide Survivor Bill of Rights that's at the United Nations, and we're making really good headway. That's
awesome. So you've done a ton that I know about. I kind of want to get to know you prior to everything at Harvard. So why don't we talk about life before that? Like, what were your interests? Like, I know being an astronaut was something that you were looking into. Like, what was life looking like pre-Harvard and then like early years at Harvard?
Yeah, well, it still is actually. And I'm so glad you brought up that point, because one thing I really want a lot of people to know, especially young women, is that you can choose to fight for what you care about, but also at the same time, not give up your professional careers.
Totally.
Yeah, so during my internship at NASA, I went to my astronaut mentors who were really, really caring, and then when I decided to fight for my rights, I went back to them. And they told me, hey, space is going to be there. It's going to be there long after
you're not going anywhere, right?
Yeah. So absolutely fight for what you believe in, and we are here as a community to back you up, and I've been so grateful for that. But honestly, before everything, even before Harvard, I was a super nerd, and I still am a super nerd.
So what does that look like, being a super nerd?
It means that, honestly, my hobbies are astrophysics, which sounds so terrible. But yeah, I mean, there's a great website to look at data on exoplanet hunting, and it's called planethunters.org.
That's like a deep cut right there for somebody like me.
It's run out of Yale's astrophysics department. But yeah, I like to, actually it's quite meditative to just look at data and see whether or not I can find an exoplanet.
That's awesome. So why don't we talk about Harvard? It's obviously an incredible spot, and specifically in Cambridge is a really cool situation. So what were the early years like for you at Harvard?
Geez, so, I came from a family who were boat refugees from Vietnam. Harvard is literally the furthest thing from that. So really, I got culture shock when I was there. I was first generation, period, in America, but also first generation to go to college, let alone Harvard, right? So there were all of these rules that I really didn't know. And there have recently been a movement for immigrant children at Ivies or at higher education to invest in helping this acclimation happen. So fraternities and sororities, final clubs as they're called at Harvard, all of these things were super new to me. But even so, I met the best people who are still my closest friends on earth.
I gotcha. So why don't we get into the final semester, because that's where life changes for you. You're a rape survivor. So however comfortable you are in sharing, what were the circumstances around that situation, and what were the days kind of after the rape looking like for you?
Yeah, so honestly, I cared about these issues so much, but had no idea what it was like to face a criminal justice system until I actually had to walk through it as a rape survivor. In the direct aftermath of my rape, I went to the hospital. I had a rape kit procedure. For those who don't know, it's 3 to 7 hours long.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's that long because it's a full forensic collection and life-saving medical attention to your body. Your body is the crime scene. And so it's very detailed, and it is in itself and can be a very difficult examination. After that happened, I had no idea where it went. And when I remember still walking out of the hospital, very disoriented, and there was this administrator in the front, the secretary in the front of the hospital, who just handed me a taxi voucher to go back to the place where I was raped.
Wow.
And I was thinking at that moment, where do I go from here? And as someone who has an education, who has resources. You know, one of the Harvard Law lecturers, Diane Rosenfeld, had helped me navigate through this time. Even with all of these resources, I had no idea where some basic information was. So where my rape kit was, how long they were going to hold on to it, even if they were going to destroy it or test it. And I found myself going through a very Kafkaesque labyrinth. And a really critical moment for me was walking into my local area rape crisis center. The room was filled, the waiting room was filled. And I thought to myself, if I have these resources and this is how much I'm struggling, then what are the rest of the people in this room? How are they functioning? And that's when I realized that I really had to do something. In particular, I found out that in Massachusetts, before my law was passed there, destroyed untested rape kits at 6 months, even if the statute of limitations is 15 years. Now, there's several double standards to this. One of them is that rape, a violent Class A felony, isn't treated the same as murder, also a violent Class A felony. In murder cases, evidence isn't destroyed, but in rape cases, they are. Another double standard is that convicted rapists had the right to hold on to the evidence for the duration of their conviction, but survivors did not. And so that's when I sent out an email to everyone that I knew, and I asked them to help me create RISE and create this Bill of Rights, which now protects survivors from having their rape kits destroyed, among many other civil rights things. That's
amazing. So what's the time span between the incident occurring and you starting RISE and sending out that email and just opening up to people in general in your life?
That's a great, I have to say, everybody's healing journey is different. I want to caveat that. For me, the first week after I was raped, when I went back from the hospital, it was very difficult. You know, the question that I asked myself over and over again was how and why. And then I realized, DJ, that I could never get into the mind of a rapist. I would never get a satisfactory answer because there is no satisfactory answer to rape. That personally helped me just move forward. But even so, my grievance was specifically against the criminal justice system because survivors are told to go to the hospital and to go to the police. But when we go, we're met with the system that actually betrays us. You know, to me, I've said this and I still stand by it, the worst thing that happened to me wasn't being raped, it was being betrayed by a broken criminal justice system. It took a year, exactly. And I know this because it was the second time I had to fight for my rape kit because of the 6-month deadline. And I thought to myself, this is wrong.
It's crazy that you even had to do that.
Exactly. Why do I have to do this? And at the second time where I had to renew my kit, I said, this is it. And that's when I said, I'm going to start RISE. And I started RISE November 1st, 2014. That's when I sent out that email.
So Massachusetts is one of the states that's protected in there. So what does it mean to you that the Boston area kids at Harvard have that protection when you did not have that protection?
Yeah. I am so fortunate to be an activist who had an idea, saw it pass, is credited for it, and now have started to see the effects of it. I mean, that's extraordinary. Both fortunately and unfortunately, I've received letters from survivors who were raped after my law has been implemented. And to hear them say, my rape kit was saved because of your law. I actually remember I was in Boston and I was getting out of a taxi and a woman stopped me and she said, oh my God, I just want to let you know that because of the law that's passed, you know, my case is different. I got justice. And it's moments like that that really make this fight worth it.
How do you think about your time at Harvard overall? Because it was a life-altering event and being raped, but also great things have come from that. So how do you weigh all that in your mind?
I'm so glad you asked that question. You know, things aren't black and white. So many things are, you know, more than just yes or no. And to me, I'm so grateful still that I met the people that I did. But obviously, as old institutions go, Harvard, as well as every other college campus that's out there, can do better and should do better. I think that we've come a long way from the incredible activists before me. There were college campus activists, Andrea Rivera, Annie Clark, Dana Bolger, all of the people who did, End Rape on Campus, Know Your Nine. They're incredible activists that really paved the pathway for Rise to be able to exist and to do the work that we do.
When you think about your path, it's one thing to speak about this stuff, it's another thing to turn it into law. Like when I think about some of the social movements over history, like the civil rights movement, like actual bills were created outside of that. So how do you get to the point where you start Rise and then you're in Washington, D.C. and you're doing your thing? How does that all happen?
Yeah, so at that point I actually was in Washington, D.C. And I want to talk about this too.
Sure.
So the reason why I had this glitch in the 6 months is because right after the aftermath of my rape, I talked to legal counsel and they said, you have 15 years of statute of limitations, but if you choose to pursue a case, you will be called back to Massachusetts, and we just want to let you know that a case is on average 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
And at that point, I had gotten a dream job offer to work for the Obama administration, to work for President Obama. He only had 2 years left. And so I made the choice, which no one, survivor or not, should ever be faced, which is justice or career. I chose my career. But I chose it knowing that the criminal justice system allowed for me in 15 years to come back. And because of that, I had this tug where I had to come back to Massachusetts every 6 months and try to figure out, have you destroyed my kit yet? And please hold on to my evidence. So that's why I was located in Washington. I actually fought for the federal law at the same time as the Massachusetts law. And the federal law, surprisingly, passed first.
Incredible.
Yeah.
What was the tougher part about passing the local law in Massachusetts?
There is so much influence that modeling and symbolism has. So we are still, even though we passed a federal law in the United States, we still have to fight state by state because most rape cases are adjudicated in state courts. So the jurisdiction is state level. But because we passed it on the federal level, there spurred this incredible wave of people who just saw that this was a possibility, that they could pass something like this. So honestly, the real answer for both local level and just really anything in activism has been for us, in our experience, to be able to convince other people that it is possible, that at this moment, this window of opportunity, you can actually do something on this issue.
One of the things I think about is believability of women. I'm sure you had to deal with that too. And like your choice between justice and career is a perfect example because people say, why didn't you bring it up sooner? Why didn't you report it? It's like, well, there's a lot of other circumstances around that. So what was it like unpacking that part of it and just dealing with that head on in your own life?
Yeah. So first of all, women are often seen as unreliable narrators of their own lives. That has to stop.
Yeah.
And that's because we live in institutions and in centuries of indoctrinated patriarchy. Sounds super feminist right now? Because I am one.
It's real. Yeah.
It's real. So look, again, I want to also recognize that many people, many survivors, both women and men who are survivors, have had to face this issue of misogyny, of the patriarchy, and chose to not do anything about it. And it is because, for whatever reason they didn't think it was possible. And I want to say that's okay, right? I made the choice, and that is my own choice, and I'm very proud of it. But it doesn't mean that other people who don't speak up are less for it, right? But I also do want to say that the law is a gender. The gender is not female. It was written by a certain group of people centuries ago, and what's beautiful about the law is that we as a democracy have the right, the constitutional right, to petition for it to change so that it matches our generation's definition of a more perfect union. And because of that, deep belief in our legislative process, in democracy, we at RISE have been able to, one, pass these 28 laws, but also we do hold the record for America's most efficient legislative reform movement in U.S. history.
Wow.
All of our laws have passed unanimously, and they've passed at a record of a law a month.
That's really interesting, especially in such a partisan world politically.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's President Obama or President Trump.
That's
this is clearly an issue that is being prioritized. So what does that mean to you? Because listen, like I could make the argument that having President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden, like that was significant at that time, the way they cared about things.
Right.
The Trump administration has been a little bit different with Betsy DeVos and certain things being rolled back. So How do you kind of equate all of that when you guys are trying to pass bills and yet you're still getting the same support? How do you kind of look through all that stuff?
With a lot of empathy. I consider myself both an activist and an organizer. And to me, an activist is someone who has applies direct voltage, straight voltage, and organizing is directed energy. It's two forms of energy. I think both are necessary for movement building. If you remember in 2016, even though President Obama was the president, it was a fully Republican Congress.
Right.
So we passed it under Republican leadership and a Democrat president. And because we were able to do that, that has translated into the states, where we could point to say, look, this was a unanimous passage, and it has continued to show momentum under any administration. And really, that's how policy should be. It should not matter. Rights and civil rights should not be contingent upon who is in office. Right. And we should not just stall whole swaths of millions of people's rights because one person is in office or another. At Rise, our biggest critique is that we're not radical enough. And that's something I completely own. And it's because we are focused on how to most efficiently get as many rights through as possible. And it really comes back to the way we were founded. You know, for me, I literally had a timeline on my justice, 6 months. And so I would sit in front of senators who I really personally hated. But in that moment, I was going to put that hate aside. I was going to put those differences aside. And I was just going to focus on, well, what is our common shared interest? And why are we both here, right? To be able to climb over these empathy walls and sit in these very uncomfortable spaces, that's necessary to do any kind of civil rights work, especially if you want to see change within your lifetime.
And trying to get men who are 60, 70, 80 to understand the plight of women throughout history, not an easy thing to do. So when you think about your experience, what were the toughest challenges of passing legislation, whether it was creating the bill, dealing with the people, getting it into law? What sticks out in your mind?
Everything's relationships. Everything is human level.
Yeah.
And so, you know, obviously when we would go into meetings, as we still do, we would know every single data point that it needs to be. How many survivors are there? What is, you know, the economic impact of women dropping out of the workforce because they are raped, right? What is the economic impact of all survivors staying in the workforce? At what percentage risk are you of losing your seat? You know, we would know all of these things. But at the end of the day, what really matters is being able to see the human that is sitting across from us and what does he or she like? What is their hobbies? What do they care about? Do they care about their family? Do they care about space? Are they nerds? And being able to start off like that, right? It really made a difference because it took something that was transactional and contentious to, oh, like we're here together in this shared moment and we're both trying to make this better, right? I think a lot of our strategy comes from a school of diplomacy. So, you know, I created a theory of organizing called Hopeonomics. It's both that I gamified the process of passing a law, and then I also applied national security theory to it. And when you think about diplomacy, you know, when our diplomats go overseas and they talk about, let's say, denuclearizing something, there may be a lot of other issues that they care about, but for that moment, they're just going to be talking about denuclearization, right? And that's what we train our organizers to do.
Yeah, definitely. So you were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Where were you when you found out about the news?
Oh, my God, it was like lightning struck me. I mean, like, how could you know? I was in San Francisco, and I remember just like my eyeballs dilating. I mean, I literally I couldn't function for a little bit because it was such an immense moment. And I think I was meeting 2 risers in California, and I called them, I was like, you guys have to find me. I don't know where I am, but I just have this news, earth-shattering. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. So the 2 women who nominated me was a Republican congresswoman and a Democrat congresswoman.
So again, bipartisan support.
Exactly, which is enormous. It's an enormous statement to the fact that they believed in this so much that they would put aside their partisan differences.
Yeah.
And it has made a world of a difference to shine the spotlight on our United Nations work. I actually had the incredible honor of joining the Nobel Peace Prize Committee at the 2018 ceremony for Nadia Murad and Dennis Mukwege. And you know what? I don't want a wedding. I want a Nobel Peace Prize ceremony because it's literally the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Where was it?
Oslo.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, it was just this incredible, powerful, beautiful moment where the world seemed to stop and put this, it's not even prestige, but this respect towards peace. Right? It was this awe towards what we could achieve if we focused on our similarities rather than our differences. And I just wish I could have been able to bring that feeling, and I have been trying to everywhere I go because it was incredible.
So you've had many great moments. You've been through some really dark times. Throughout this whole journey, how have you evolved as a person, and what have been the biggest things in terms of differences along the way?
You know, everybody has been posting on Instagram their decade of glow-ups. Yeah, I've actually been really struggling to write mine, and it's because there's so much.
A lot to digest.
There's a lot to digest. And also because I don't want it, what really matters to me is authenticity. And I really want people to understand that, yeah, there are a lot of wars, but also there's a lot of struggles that went into it. And I think at the end of the day, I'm just trying to figure out how to be myself, you know? And I think back to this moment in 2009. My favorite artist, Shepard Fairey, is issued online one of his signed, pieces, and I had waited all night till midnight when he released it to buy, and I tried buying it. I waited, for this moment, and it literally sold out like this in a second, and I couldn't buy it. And 10 years later, I am a Shepard Fairey poster.
Wow.
He along with Amplifier included me in their We the Future campaign. And this piece of artwork was plastered all over the United States. I mean, I saw children printed out huge posters and hold it in the Women's March. I saw it blown up 4 stories high, And I've heard comments of people who passed by it where they're like, they don't know it's me, but it resonated with them so much. It became one of the posters for and during the Kavanaugh hearings, when I asked Shepard to change it to We the Future Believe Survivors. And to be, this kid in a dorm room trying to get her favorite artist poster to being his actual poster.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I just think about that journey, and most importantly, I want people to know that it is absolutely possible to be happy doing what you love and also fighting for what you believe in.
Yeah, well, thank you for fighting every single day. It's really a pleasure to meet you. I was at the Women's March in DC as well.
Oh,
yeah.
In 2017?
Yeah.
Nice.
I didn't even realize you spoke because me and my wife didn't even get anywhere near anybody that spoke. But the buzz that day was unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life.
I remember we got all the speakers were asked to get there a couple hours early, and I remember, so I got there like, I think 8 a.m., and they were like, oh, it's gonna be like 200,000 people, and then I remember not only everything in front of us was filled, but all the streets back.
Couldn't even walk.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, this is more than 200,000 people. Yeah, it was, what a momentous day, and I just wanna say confidently in this decade, it's just going to get better because we're going to fight for it every single day.
Let's keep it going. Amanda, really nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, for Amanda, I'm DJ. See you next time here on The Sit Down.